On how the rules towards purchasing antibiotics are going to change here. My name is Stacey Domlewski. I'm the Research and Innovation Coordinator for the BCRC, and I'm going to be your moderator for tonight. Our session tonight will last for approximately 1 hour, but could go a little longer depending on the number of questions we have during the question and answer session. If you're on Twitter, please tweet along with us tonight using #BeefWebinar. We are recording this session, and I'll email out a link to the recording to everyone that's registered in the next couple of days. So if you miss hearing anything tonight and want to watch anything again, you can. Of course, you're going to be able to hear and see tonight's presenters, but we're not going to be able to hear or see you. So if you do want to communicate with us, just type into the small chat window on the control panel on the side of your screen. Or it could be on the top of your screen or the bottom, depending on what type of computer you have as well. There's a Q&A box up there that you should be able to type any questions you have. Feel free to send your questions in at any point in time, but we'll most likely answer them towards the end of the webinar. If your internet connection is being a bit slow tonight, it might help to close the webcam windows. You're not going to be able to see us, but it might help the slides load a little bit better and the sound come in a little bit clearer. Also, if you're connected to any type of external server or anything like that, if you close that down, that might help as well. So with that, let's get started here. So here's what we're going to be covering tonight. I'm pleased to start with our first speaker here, Reynold Bergen. Reynold is the Science Director for the BCRC. In a nutshell, his job is to explain science to beef producers and explain beef producers to scientists. So with that, I will let you take it away, Reynold.
Oh, how's this?
So I'm seeing the presenter view, so
I'll try this one more time.
No, we'll just go with what it is.
How's this now?
There we go. Perfect.
Oh, beautiful.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Usually in this thing, we talk about research that your checkoff is funding and how, that's going to benefit your operation. Tonight's more in the vein of a public service announcement. We're going to be talking about some rule changes that the federal government's come up with that are likely to impact your operation and how it could impact your operation. These changes that we're going to talk about are driven by global concerns about antibiotic resistance. Canada's not the only one dealing with this. It's as much about human medicine as it is about veterinary medicine, but we all live in the same world and we're all using the same drugs, and so we're all in this together. So Canada's efforts on this really started back in 2014, and that's when the federal government released its federal framework for action to address antimicrobial resistance in Canada. And they followed that up a year later with their federal action plan on antibiotic resistance. And this is a pretty complex issue. It involves quite a number of different federal departments, both on the human health and the animal health side, and so that sort of explains why it's been a pretty intricate thing for them to wrangle here. But this action plan was really based on three main things. It was based on surveillance, which was looking for trends and incidents of antimicrobial surveillance, looking at innovation, ways to reduce our reliance on antibiotics, as well as stewardship, which is about keeping antibiotics working as effectively as they can for as long as we can. And so what we're going to be talking about tonight is really all about a bunch of things that are happening around their stewardship pillar here. So among the various things that they decided to tackle on the stewardship side were removing label claims for growth promotion related to medically important antibiotics. And so those removing growth promotion claims from medically important antibiotics is not something that's concerned anybody that I've talked to. Another one that they were dealing with on the stewardship side was I'm going to click on here. The other one was to increase veterinary oversight on medically important antibiotics on feed and water, and that's going to make some big changes to some producers, and especially on the feed side, and that Melissa's going to shed some light on how those things are going to work, hopefully. And then just over a year ago, Health Canada broadened this initiative beyond just the growth promoting claims and the in-feed and in-water use of antibiotics, and decided, okay, we're going to broaden this to include all medically important antimicrobials. So not just in-feed and in-water, but also include all of them. So whether they're injectables or boluses will be impacted by this as well. And that's a big change for a lot of producers, and so that's why we've really been beating on this for the last year to increase producer awareness of these upcoming changes. What this means for producers really is that you will not any longer be able to just walk into a farm store and buy an antibiotic. Now, a lot of these antibiotics are prescription only already. In fact, anything that Health Canada has approved since 2004 was prescription only. So these ones at the top here, these were prescription only before, and they're going to be prescription only now. And these ones at the bottom, they're mostly dewormers and ionophores, so things like Rumensin, Bovatec, Posistac, Avitec. Those are not used to treat bacterial infections in humans, so they're not considered to be medically important, and they will still be available. But it's the ones in the middle here, that this whole laundry list in here are antibiotics that you used to be able to buy over the counter, but that you won't be able to anymore. So the bottom line here is, with these rule changes, that no matter where you are in Canada, over-the-counter sales of medically important antibiotics are going to stop at the end of this month. Starting December 1st, you're going to need a veterinary prescription before you will be able to buy any medically important antibiotic for livestock. You'll only be able to get a prescription from a veterinarian with whom you have a valid veterinary client-patient relationship. And then just to make it complicated, provincial rules vary from province to province about who is actually legally able to sell or dispense antibiotics. And so that's kind of the high level impacts that are coming at you in the next 2 weeks. And with that, that kind of brings us to today, and I'm going to turn this back over to Stacy, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Great. Thank you very much for that overview, Reynold. Our next speaker tonight is Melissa Dumont. She's the Executive Director of the Animal Nutrition Association of Canada. In this role, Melissa oversees all activities of the association and continues to lead some technical files, including those related to antimicrobial use and resistance. So Melissa is going to share with us some of the changes you'll see when you go to buy your feed in the next month.
Okay,
there we go.
You can hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, let me just get my screen sharing. That's good?
Perfect.
Perfect, great. Well, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Reynold. That was a great introduction to my presentation, talking about the antibiotic policy changes that are happening on December 1st and their impact on feed mills and also specifically on the beef industry. So just to give a little bit of background for those who are on the webinar today, the current status for in-feed antimicrobials and how we tackle these. Most antimicrobials are currently on Health Canada's over-the-counter schedule. So Reynold did talk about that everything since 2004 went on the prescription drug list. However, most antimicrobials that we currently use in animal agriculture have been approved before 2004, especially those that are in feed. So the majority of the in-feed medications are currently over the counter. And that means that commercial medicated feed without a prescription, as long as the feed is being manufactured pursuant to the Compendium of Medicated Ingredient brochure. So you might start hearing a little bit more about what we call the CMIB, and that is the federal regulations around antibiotics that go in feed and which ones are allowed to go in feed at what levels for what species. So the CMIB encompasses all of that information. It is the tool that commercial feed mills have been using for many, many years to ensure that we're manufacturing medicated feed properly. However, if the CMIB is not being followed today, veterinary prescription is required before we can start manufacturing the feed. So in some cases where veterinarians are prescribing extra label drug use, or there are combinations of drugs that are being used in feed that are not approved as per the CMIB, it has always been practiced that a veterinary prescription is needed, and feed mill cannot start manufacturing that feed before they have the prescription in hand. Today as well, commercial feed mills can sell bags of DIN drug premixes. And when we're talking about DIN drug premixes here, we're talking about medications that are to be mixed into feed. So they are in-feed medications that have not yet been mixed. They are the original format straight from the pharmaceutical companies. And so we currently, as the commercial feed industry, sell a lot of those premixes directly to producers. So producers who mix their own feed on farm, buy them from commercial feed mills, as most of these are on the over-the-counter schedule. So that is kind of our platform today, and what we have been working with for many, many years in the feed industry. And as producers, this is how you've been able to access your medicated feed, as well as accessing your feed that goes, or your medications that would be incorporated in feed on farm. So what is changing? What is changing is that all medically important antimicrobials, as Reynold said, which are currently on the over-the-counter drug list, are moving to Health Canada's prescription drug list. So these will all be considered prescription products come December 1st. And as far as commercial feed mills, we'll still be able to sell medicated feed containing these products. However, we will always be required to have a veterinary prescription in hand at that time. Commercial feed mills will also no longer be able to sell bags of DIN drug premixes. So for those producers who mix their own feed on farm and used to buy their medication, their in-feed medication from commercial feed mills, come December 1st, that will no longer be allowed, even if you do have a veterinary prescription. And to complicate things, I should add as well that this is not the case in Quebec. Quebec does have a special licensing system that do allow producers to buy, producers who are licensed to buy DIN drug premixes from commercial feed mills, but at this point in time, that is the only province that allows this activity. So for all the other provinces, come December 1st, this activity will no longer be allowed, and you're going to have to purchase your in-feed medication if you're mixing on farm directly from a veterinarian. So as we mentioned, rules about who can sell and who can dispense prescription products with whether it's in feed or out of feed is a provincial jurisdiction, and so it really varies from province to province. So definitely, I'm not going to go through all of the rules for all the provinces tonight, because I think we'd be here for a couple hours. But definitely check with your local veterinarians and your local feed mills as well as to the rules in your specific province, to make sure that you are following them properly. So here's a list that Reynold had a huge list, and I've tailored it down a little bit for the in-feed medications for beef producers only. So here are the products today that you're able to get over the counter from commercial feed mills, and that you're able to buy medicated feed with these products in there without a prescription. And these are the products that has come December 1st. They will be moving to the Health Canada's prescription drug list. So we've got our Chlorotet, Oxytet, as well as Tylosin and Tilmicacin. And I think the Tylan is really probably the biggest impact for you guys, as well as some of the Chlorotets. So definitely something to keep in mind if these are antibiotics that you do tend to use regularly on your farm, whether you're buying the DIN drug premixes or you're buying medicated feed from a commercial feed mill. How you purchase these and what is required to purchase these will change come December 1st. So as far as the in-feed medications that will not be changing on December 1st, these are what Reynolds referred to are category 4s, or medications that are not antibiotics. This is the list here. So these products will continue to be on the over-the-counter schedule, and that means that you can buy medicated feed with these medications in them from your commercial feed mill without a prescription. And as well, you can buy bags of these products to mix on-farm directly for on-farm milling from your feed mills as well. So nothing is going to change for these medications. It's really the medications that I had on the previous slide that we need to focus on, and that we need to make sure that we're prepared to adapt to those changes. So as far as prescription medicated feed and gin drug premixes, this is just a quick slide just to show the complexity of Health Canada's laws around who can sell, who can buy, and who can access these products. So Health Canada does make the decision on whether these medications are prescription or are over the counter, and they do also have some oversight on the sale of these medications. So as far as drug manufacturers, who drug manufacturers can sell to, who pharmacists and veterinarians can sell to, and as well as commercial feed mills. So as you'll see in this chart, between pharmacists, veterinarians, and commercial feed mills, we pretty much have a free movement of products, which is good news to ensure that everybody is able to access products in a timely manner. So this means both DIN drug premixes and prescription medicated feed. But really what's changing, and I should specify that this isn't a change, it's just that the amount of products that are prescription are changing. So where we have a difference of what producers are used to is between the commercial feed mill and the producers. So you'll see that there's only an orange line that focuses down there, and that means that that's prescription medicated feed, and producers will only be able to purchase that from commercial feed mills once they have a prescription. As far as DIN drug premixes are concerned, so that's the blue line, those will be able to be purchased from veterinarians or pharmacists directly. But again, those will need prescriptions. And as far as which veterinarian and which pharmacist you can buy from, that is a provincial legislation. For example, in Alberta, you can buy them, you can have your veterinarian, but you can buy your DIN drug premixes from another veterinarian or a pharmacist if you choose to, whether it's for convenience or for price reasons. However, in Ontario, the College of Veterinarians of Ontario have made the decision that you have to buy your medication from the veterinarian that prescribes them unless there is an emergency situation which does not allow you to do so, or if that veterinarian doesn't hold those products. So it really differs between province, and just make sure that you're aware. And again, like I said, have a conversation with your veterinarian, have a conversation with your feed mill, with your nutritionist, just to make sure that come December 1st, if you do need products, you know exactly where to go to be able to access them. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the feed mill aspect and just try to explain how feed mills work and how the timing of prescriptions and the manufacturing medicated feed work, just to try to outline a little bit what producers are going to see that are different. So as far as the feed industry, we're not regulated by the provinces, we're federally regulated, mostly by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. When we're talking about drugs, we do have some Health Canada requirements as well, but we do mostly have the Feeds Act and the Health of Animals Act, which oversee our industry. And when we're looking into the Feeds Act and the feeds regulations, that is what talks about medicated feed and prescription medicated feed and the requirements that a feed mill must have to be able to manufacture and sell those medicated feeds. So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, important for producers to know, do inspect feed mills at least annually, if not many times per year, and they're in charge of product registration and labeling, and again, labeling of prescription medicated feeds, manufacturing, contaminants, feed composition and analysis, as well as commercial feed mill inspections. So medication oversight is a big part of our commercial feed mill inspections, as far as whether we have the prescriptions in hand or not, and they're valid, the use and the inventory of the medications, as well as our medication tolerances and our carryover residues between our batches that we manufacture. So we have to follow Health Canada rules. We have to ensure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that producers have feed on time. But behind that, we also have our own set of regulations that go and add to the complexity of the picture around managing medicated feed, and especially prescription medicated feed. So there really are three types of medicated feed that a feed mill will manufacture, and it's important to understand these three types just to understand about timing of prescription, timing of ordering. So the first type are feeds that contain medications, which are on Health Canada's over-the-counter schedule and made in accordance with the CMIB. So here we're talking about the CMIB again. So this is a very simple type of medicated feed to make. We do not require a prescription. We can pre-manufacture and floor stock at the commercial feed mills, as well as at retail outlets. So these are the feeds that you will see that might have your decox or might have some of your other products, your category 4 products in there. You need 3 or 4 bags of calf starter, for example, medicated calf starter, easy for you to get at a commercial feed mill and at a retail outlet if it's on the over-the-counter schedule, and it is as per CMIB. So that means that it's being manufactured as per the approved label in Canada. So very simple, and this is the majority of the beef feeds that were manufactured today used to fall under category 1. Now we're looking with the change especially for our Thailands and our chlorotets, we're looking at category type 2 and type 3 of medicated feed. So type 2 are feeds that contain medications that are on Health Canada's prescription drug list, so Thailand, for example, and these feeds are manufactured in accordance with the CMIB. So that means they're on label and there's no other drug in there that is not approved as a combination. So in this scenario, we would call this, a medium scenario where a veterinary prescription is needed for us to be able to sell this feed to a producer. However, we can pre-manufacture this feed. We can have it ready in bins. We can floor stock it as well at a commercial feed level. And when we get the producer coming in to place the order and they have the prescription on hand, then we can sell that feed to the producer. Note here for that on the prescription drug list, the only people that can, other than veterinarians and pharmacists, obviously, that can floor stock medicated feed, prescription medicated feed that's medicated with a drug that is on Health Canada's prescription drug list and accordance to the CMIB are commercial feed mills. So in the past, some of these products you would have seen at retail outlets because they were OTC. Because they are on the prescription drug list now, retail outlets are no longer allowed to floor stock any of these products. So some retail outlets and some dealerships will be able to sell them through commercial feed mills, but they will only be able to sell them once they receive the prescription and the order from the producer. So once you place that order with your dealer or with your retail outlet, they then have to go to the commercial feed mill, get the commercial feed mill to manufacture or get that feed ready and then ship it back down. So it's a much longer process than it has been in the past. So make sure if you are currently buying your feed from a retail or from a dealer, a feed dealer, that they have a signed agreement with the commercial feed mill and that they're allowed to do this activity, because not all retail outlets or dealers will be doing this come December 1st. So again, have that conversation. If you're buying from a commercial feed mill, this is not an issue, but if you're buying from a dealer or retail outlet, definitely something to look into. The third type of feed, of medicated feed, are feeds that contain medications that can be either on Health Canada's over-the-counter schedule or on the prescription drug list, but that are used in an off-label manner. So this means they're used differently than what the label allows them to be used for, is approved for them to be used for. So for example, if you're using a medication but at a higher dosage than what's on the label, that would be considered off-label. Or if you're using it in a combination with another drug that is not approved for use together on label, then that would be considered label. Or if you're using a drug that is approved for a species, a different species than cattle, but you're using it in cattle, that's also considered an off-label. So these are a lot more complicated for the feed industry to manage, because they do require a veterinary prescription, and they require that prescription to be at the feed mill before that feed can even be manufactured. So this is a rule or regulation from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, that if we are manufacturing feed that is off-label, medicated feed that's off-label, we cannot start manufacturing that feed until we have that prescription in hand. And the prescriptions that are required, Health Canada does have some some requirements of what needs to be on a prescription, but the Canadian Food Inspection Agency also does have some requirements of what needs to be on in-feed prescriptions. So we are currently working diligently to try to educate and talk to veterinarians about what is required on a feed prescription, because many veterinarians have never written feed prescriptions in the past. So that's definitely going to be a challenge come December 1st for those who have not done that. So we're trying to do as much outreach to have this as seamless as possible. So I just thought I'd put this slide up really quickly just to explain quickly what will be allowed as far as what kind of scenarios for sale of medicated feed with a prescription product. So we've got our Pathway 1. This is a Health Canada document that has just been released. And we've got our Pathway 1, which is the typical pathway. You've got a commercial feed mill that is manufacturing a medicated feed and is selling it to a producer. So very simple. You've got Pathway 2, where you've got a commercial feed mill who uses a third party to ship, or they use a warehouse to cross-dock or to hold their product for a while and then sell it to producers. That will still be allowed going forward. And then you've got option 3 and 4, and this is where I was talking about the retail and the dealers, is if the commercial feed mill owns those retail outlets, that's not a problem. It's very simple for them to manufacture and to sell through them. However, if they don't own them, they do have to have legal agreements with those dealers. And so that's where it comes to find out if those retail outlets and those dealers are going to have that legal agreement with commercial feed mills to be able to sell their product. And as I explained earlier, the important part to remember as well is if those dealers do get into the business of continuing to sell these products and selling prescription feed, they cannot floor stock. So you cannot just walk into one of those dealers or one of those retail outlets and ask for a feed, even if you have your prescription in hand. They legally cannot have it in the facility until that order has been placed. So they will have to get it from the commercial feed mill and then deliver it to your farm or bring it into the dealership for you to sell. So that is really that change there with the dealers. So as a producer, what do I need to know? Definitely, before December 1st, so we're a couple weeks away now, know which antibiotics you're currently using on your farm and which ones are just your regular antibiotics or your regular feeds. And then decide whether or not December 1st, you'll still be able to access them the same way. So did you used to buy your DIN drug premixes to mix on farm from from a retail outlet or from some kind of farmer's pharmacy, for example? If those are prescription products that you used to buy there or products that are going to become prescription on December 1st, you can no longer buy them there. So make sure that you know where you're buying your products and whether or not December 1st, they're still going to be able to sell and carry those products for you. And same thing if you're buying medicated feed, investigate to make sure that come December 1st, you know whether or not you're still going to be able to buy them, whether or not you're going to need a prescription, and whether or not you're going to need a prescription before they can even manufacture the feed. So definitely that is the number one point that I want to stress on today. And as well, if you currently purchase medicated feed, what kind of medicated feed do you purchase? So is it, type 1? If it is, that's great. Nothing changes. Business as usual come December 1st. But if it is type 2 or 3, there will be some changes. So remember that a veterinary prescription will be required. And the points of sales might change. So where you used to buy your prescription or your feed, you might not be able to buy that type of feed there anymore. As far as non-medicated feed, there's nothing changing. So if you're buying non-medicated feed, that is not an issue. So also know who a commercial feed mill is. There's been a lot of questions around what is a commercial feed mill? Who is a commercial feed mill? So how can I know who I can buy these products from come December 1st, these medicated feeds? We will be posting on our website a public list of commercial feed mills by December 1st. So this is something that is not currently available. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency do inspect the commercial feed mills, but they do not have a public list available. So this is something that ANAC will be doing, and that should be available on our website, anacan.org, by December 1st. So if you're not sure who in your area would be considered a commercial feed mill, that will be a great place to be able to go and get that information. And again, Reynold mentioned this, but ensure you have a valid vet-client-patient relationship. The last thing you need is to realize your bin is empty, you need a prescription, you don't have a BCPR, you can't get a prescription quickly. So really make sure that is in place and that you're ready for the upcoming changes. Especially if you're ordering prescription medicated feed, and especially type 3, know that we need that prescription in hand before we can start manufacturing, and that prescription also needs to be accurate. So sometimes there's information missing on prescriptions. About 50% of the prescriptions that feed mills currently get in the door have to be changed or modified because there's some information missing and that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency requires. So that takes time, and veterinarians are busy and out on the road, and feed mills are busy, and producers are as well. So ensuring that you have those prescriptions in a timely manner and that you've had those discussions with your veterinarian ahead of time will be key to ensure that that when you do need your feed, that we'll be able to make it as quickly as possible. So I think that is the end of my presentation, and I will pass it back over to you, Stacy.
All right, thank you very much for that, Melissa. That was really great. Just a reminder to anybody who's watching tonight, you can send in any questions you have for the presenters at any time. If you scroll to the bottom of your screen or the top, depending on what your computer is, you'll see a little bar with a bunch of signals, but there will be one that says Q&A. If you click on that box, you can type in any questions you have at any time there, and we'll answer them at the end. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Cody Creelman. He grew up in Beaver Lodge, Alberta on a commercial cow-calf operation and raised purebred Simmental cattle. He currently works with Veterinary Agri-Health Services, and his professional interests include pathology, large animal surgery, cow-calf and feedlot production medicine. As well, since becoming a veterinarian, Dr. Creelman has discovered a new passion revolving around the use of mobile technology in the field. So I will turn it over to you, Cody. You can hear me? You're good to go.
Good. Perfect. All right. I should also mention on top of that, I do own the Fairview Veterinary Clinic, the High Prairie Veterinary Clinic, the Peace River Veterinary Clinic, and the Maple Creek Veterinary Clinic. So if there's any participants from those practices and you have additional questions, please reach out to me or reach out to any one of the staff, because we're trying to make this transition as smooth as possible amongst all 5 of the practices, and then across the provinces as well. So I've been asked to speak at numerous producer meetings. I've talked to the feed mills as well, to just kind of lay it all out there as to what the next couple months will look like and what will things look like going forward. And I've gotten quite a few questions from producers, and make sure you guys in the chat function ask some of the questions that I know you're going to have, just because we just need to make sure that this veterinary client patient relationship thing is down pat, so you understand whether or not you'll be able to access antimicrobials and any animal health products that you'll need going forward. So as was mentioned before, this statement of each provincial regulatory body does have a variety of different regulations that we're trying to adhere to. For the most part, they're fairly similar when it comes to the VMAs or the veterinary medical associations. So what's going to happen is, if you're currently using a veterinarian, let's just say you have a great relationship with a vet, you have them out for preg testing, you talk to them regularly when you're having a herd outbreak situation, you're going into the clinic and purchasing some prescription products like modified live vaccines, everything's probably okay. You have a great relationship. All the things in the background in terms of what veterinarians have to do are likely taken care of. If you are not working with a veterinary clinic, that's when things are probably going to get a little bit more difficult. And I've looked at some of the statistics, at least in Alberta, as to what that potentially looks like. And as far as I can tell, it's up to 40% of producers in Alberta still do not have a working relationship with a veterinarian. Now, I don't think that 40% represents 40% of the total cattle population in Alberta, but 40% of the people who have cows, and maybe those are some smaller herds, do not likely have this valid veterinary client relationship, or at least hadn't at the time that that study was published. So there is a potentially massive amount of work to be done to get everybody up to that point. Now, what needs to happen in order for that relationship to exist is on your side. What that is establishing what veterinarian you would like to work with. From our side, we need to do a whole lot of things to make sure that we're in compliance to that end result of being able to complete that dispensing of that antimicrobial. So let's just make up a scenario. So let's say that you've always been able to access penicillin from your local feed store, or tetracycline at your local feed store, and you have a foot rot. A lot of people are thinking now, because of the regulations, that in order for you to access antimicrobials, that you're going to have to call the veterinarian out to look at, diagnose, and treat that foot rot, to actually pay a vet to give that injection. And that's not at all the case. What needs to happen, so now you go to the feed store, you do not have the ability to access that penicillin, so you walk across to the local vet clinic. You can't just purchase that antimicrobial. We need to make sure that we know you. That's really the premises of a veterinary client relationship, is that we understand your operation. We understand that you have the ability to diagnose and treat different diseases appropriately. And we need to document that within the medical record, that you have a medical need. So what that would look like, let's just say a farmer with 200 cows walks into my practice and says they're having a foot rot outbreak and they need to treat, and they would like to treat with an antimicrobial. I would need to then sit down with them and create a medical record in terms of their herd history. I would need to know how many cows he has and what his challenges are, and what his breeding season is, and what type of pasture his animals are on. All the pertinent things that are important for me to understand exactly what's going on, no different than when a doctor is taking a history in a medical office. They need to know what's going on in that patient's life. And then we document that. We document that into a medical record. So we write down all of this information, and from there we then have the ability to decide whether or not we think that a prescription is appropriate. So if we do think that, yes, this producer certainly has a foot rot outbreak, and we need to put in place a prescription for this penicillin or this tetracycline or whatever we see fit, we then can write a prescription, and then from there the producer in most provinces, I'm going to use Alberta for an example, in most provinces has the ability to then fulfill that prescription from that veterinarian, or from a different veterinarian, or from a human pharmacy, if a human pharmacy was carrying that product. Now, from the regulatory aspect, is at any point within that process, I as a veterinarian could get audited by the Vet Med Association, where they could walk into my practice and they could see me handing over a bottle of penicillin to a producer, and they would say, okay, Cody, you need to provide all of the supporting documentation to show me that this product was dispensed appropriately. You need to be able to show me that there was a prescription in place. You need to show me that there was a supporting medical record in place, that you understand this producer's operation. You know what's going on in terms of the animal health and welfare of that producer's operation. And that supports that veterinary patient-client relationship. And on top of that, there may be have to have some sort of site visits. It's not just good enough in most circumstances that we just have a sit down or a phone conversation. At times I'm going to need to validate that. I'm going to verify that, yes, you do have 200 cows, and I'm not writing prescriptions for 200 modified live vaccines when in fact you only have 10 cows and you're selling the rest to your neighbors. So there has to be some sort of verification to that entire process. And then at that point, everything is legit. Everything is kosher. We are now able to continue that relationship going forward. That that I need to, be able to talk to you when you're having an outbreak situation, and then I'm putting prescriptions in place. I'm documenting that in the medical record. Every phone call that I get as a veterinarian, I'm documenting that into the medical record. That you call me and say that you have a calf with pneumonia, I don't have to look at that calf. I just need to say, did you take its temperature? What does it look like? Send me a video, send me a picture, and I put that into the medical record, and then I can write a prescription for that. And that is the supporting evidence that exists, that supporting medical need, that then I can write that prescription. I cannot write a prescription just willy-nilly. I cannot just sit down with Melissa and say, I'm going to write you a prescription for 1 bottle of penicillin. I cannot legally do that. I have to have a supporting medical record proving a veterinary patient-client relationship exists. So that's what is a veterinary patient-client relationship. So what isn't? So a veterinary patient-client relationship is not, I was out at your place 3 months ago for a C-section, and this was the first time I was on your farm, and we talked about coffee, and we talked about hockey, and we talked about the stock market. And then 3 months later, you come into my practice and you would like a bottle of Newflor for some navel issues that you're having. That is not an appropriate documentation and support of a medical need. That is not an appropriate veterinary patient-client relationship. Just because I had been at your farm doing a procedure does not mean that I had fulfilled all of my requirements as a veterinarian. I need to have a discussion about your health challenges and about your feeding strategies and about your bull turnout dates. All of that information. It is not good enough for me to be out at your place with for a semen test, and we just perform the semen test, and I tell you your bull passes, and then I walk away. That is not enough. We need to sit down and we need to consult. We need to support in a medical record. So this is a big concern for us within our practice in terms of the amount of workload that this could potentially create for us. Like I said, with our existing clientele, nothing changes. If you have been able to purchase a bottle of Micatil from your veterinarian in the last 10 years, nothing changes for you, except where you won't be able to access penicillin or tetracyclines or any antibiotic containing compound over the counter at the local feed store or the local farm store. That's the change. But if you have that relationship with a veterinarian, you're good. You should be assured that if your veterinarian has been dispensing prescription products in the past to you, that they are meeting all the requirements by their local VMA, their local vet med association, and they will be continuing that relationship going forward through supporting medical records and supporting prescriptions and dispensing those prescription products appropriately. What I guess our practice is trying to maybe brace ourselves for a little bit, and our practice is, across Alberta and Saskatchewan, is that 40%, the 40% of producers that have relied on being able to manage their herd without a relationship with a veterinarian. And there certainly is lots of circumstances where that's perfectly acceptable and possible, where, you would be able to purchase a tetracycline or penicillin at the feed store, and then if that didn't work, then you borrowed a syringe of Draxxin or Micatil from your neighbor, which is illegal by the letter of the law. That is illegal, but that's how a lot of producers have operated. That use what you can buy without a relationship with a veterinarian, and then perhaps get creative and access pharmaceuticals in a different manner in case you need it. So when these producers come to us, we've really put a lot of thought into how can we streamline that process for everybody. When we try to streamline it, what we're talking about is just making it really safe and an upfront, clear experience for producers, so they understand exactly what's going on. That all of our staff are on the same page, that all of our staff are trained and they know exactly what needs to happen in order for you to access the pharmaceuticals that you need to access. We don't want anybody turned away mad, or we don't want anybody scared to call a veterinarian because they think that a bottle of LA200 is now going to cost $200 or is going to be associated with a vet administration fee. That's not at all the case. We want clear communication as to what exactly needs to happen. We need to have clear communication at the front desk or when you call in that you just need to have a conversation with a veterinarian. That veterinarian needs to understand your operation. They need to document that in the medical record, and they need to make sure that you understand when you get into a problem that you can diagnose that and treat that appropriately, and they're going to help you. They're going to put those prescriptions in place. And we have these really nice, within our own practices, we have these really nice client intake forms that allows that allows us to easily collect that information as veterinarians or veterinary technicians, that we can put that into the medical record, that we're using, you know, technology to help us make sure that we know when you need a site visit, when a site visit's coming up, when you haven't gone, or when it's been a long time since you've communicated with a veterinarian. It allows us to access that information so we know whether or not you have a valid patient-client relationship. So we're investing a lot of time and resources into producers through this transitionary period to be able to create this relationship. What can't happen, I think, is a person comes in for a bottle of penicillin, and then 3 years late, and we do all this work, we do the documentation, we do the prescriptions, and then 3 years later, you know, they show up and they just expect to be able to purchase a bottle of Nuflor, you know, or the same bottle of penicillin. That's not how it works. We have to have that open communication. We have to know still what's going on in your farm. At times, like I said, we need to have that site visit. We need to have that supporting medical need within our medical record. So it's not good enough to just like touch base every 3 years. And at that point, you know, there may be a time when we are charging for these sit-down consults. Right now, we're not. We're just trying to make it all happen. We're trying to invest in producers first through the transitionary period in order for us to be able to have the ability to allow you guys to access the pharmaceuticals that you need to access. So I understand it is a frustrating and scary time for producers who are not using veterinarians. But I think for the most part, everybody, if we just keep a level head, that there is a lot of options, and we're just going to have to trust that, you know, that the veterinary community is going to support producers, and that producers have to trust that all of the, I guess, kind of negative questions that I've got, you know, that we're not going to increase prices, and we're not going to have a monopoly on the penicillin market, and all of these things that I think producers think is kind of worst case scenario. That's not at all the case. We're looking to work with producers to be able to allow you guys to access this. Like, there's no veterinarian in the world that is going to be able to retire on the margin on penicillin. Like, it's just not a logical thing that exists. I think the biggest question that I get is really not even about the injectable antimicrobial side. The biggest question I get is about chicken feed. People are petrified, and maybe this is a good question for Melissa, but like, people are petrified about not being able to get medicated chicken feed, and for the most part, they're pretty good on the injectable side. I think they understand that they just need to talk with vets. So I'm going to run through some of these questions. I don't know if Stacy wants to come back on, but I think most of these popped up once I started yapping. So George, he asks, can you still just call the vet up and tell him you need to bring in a cow for a C-section? Absolutely, as long as you have a great relationship with your veterinarian, and it's understood that you are, you know, that veterinarian is your vet for emergency calls. There's no issues at all. Nate asks, where can I read a summary from the ABVMA of what a vet-client relationship needs to look like. I've tried to find a document that outlines this, but I cannot find it. I think the team at BCRC certainly could put that link out. There is a great link on the AVVMA website. There has been tons of resource documentation. So I'm sure the BCRC team can put that together somewhere, either in the show notes here or in a email in the near future.
So yeah, we'll send out a follow-up email with a link to watch the recording of this, and we will make sure that we have the copy of that link in there as well.
Right. Okay, perfect. Chad asks, will there be an increase in price on common large animal products? I think, or maybe that's long-acting products compared to the local farm store pricing. So that's an interesting question. I guess you have to go a little bit into how veterinarians, purchase pharmaceuticals from the pharmaceutical companies. And a lot of times, because of the large buying volume of the UFAs and the co-ops and some of these farm stores, they did have buying power over veterinarians. There was no question. They were able to purchase some of these over-the-counter products at much less than, because they were so huge. Because UFA is a giant co-op, it just makes sense. They can purchase these products for way cheaper than some of the vet clinics could. So if we do see an increase in price, I'm sure that it's not an increase in price because the markup has gone up. It's just because that a single veterinarian in nowhere Alberta does not have the ability to compete on purchase power in comparison to a feed store. So the margin is not changing. It's just what that base price is. Mohammed asks, do you think these changes will increase the cost of production in general? These changes will affect the prices of these products. So yeah, I do think that these changes will increase the cost of production. There's no question. If there's 40% of producers not accessing veterinary care, I think there will be more money spent on veterinary care in general as we're interacting more with each other. It's just a very common thing that the more that I talk with somebody about options, talk to them about things like implants or things like deworming, or deworming strategies, the benefits of preg testing, the benefits of pre-breeding palpations, the more I interact and communicate with a client, usually their cost of production does go up because they're doing more things. They're accessing more technology. But on the flip side, the cost of production is just one side of the coin. But what about profitability? We can increase our cost of production, but the goal is always to increase overall profitability. So for example, if you're a producer with 100 head of cows and you have never talked to a veterinarian and you have never heard the benefits of implanting your calves at branding time, and you decide to do it because you've had a great conversation with your veterinarian and you understand what the benefits are, you're going to spend another $100 on your calves to put implants into those calves. That increases your cost of production, but on the flip side, you're also going to make $5,000 in weaning rate, $50 per calf extra. So your revenue increases as well. And then I think I already kind of answered the price. It is a free and open market within the veterinary industry. There's competition. Certainly there's going to be less competition in areas where there's less market pressure. Where there's a lot of veterinary clinics, there's a lot of market pressure, so prices are, differ. It's just basic economics. So it really is going to be dependent on what the market pressures are for specific areas.
Okay, thanks, Cody. So for anybody I have two more questions that came in via the chat function here, but if anybody wants to ask any other questions before we wrap up here, if you go to the bottom of your screen at the Q&A box there, you can click on that and type your question. So this was kind of more of a comment or a question. I'll let you interpret it as well, but it was about vet-client-patient relationship. If you're at a different vet and you don't have a relationship with, and you require medications, essentially, can you have your vet contacted and be able to purchase those without having a relationship with the vet you're at?
Yes.
Or is that dependent on something?
So it does depend on the province. Within Alberta, it is absolutely allowed that it is your right as a producer to fill your prescription at any veterinary clinic you want at any time. So there's a complete dissociation between the prescribing action and the dispensing action. You could 100% of the time get your local veterinarian to write your prescription, and it is your right to get that filled at any clinic in Alberta that you choose without any sort of consequence. That was not the case in Saskatchewan until recently. In Saskatchewan, you were not able to do that unless in emergency situations. They have changed their bylaws to now allow that. So now the same thing applies. A veterinarian can write a script to a producer, and that producer can get that filled at a different clinic. So yes, if you walk up to the doorstep of a vet clinic you do not have a relationship with, and because you are pasturing calves out in Provost, Alberta, and you're from Airdrie, and you need a bottle of Nuflor because you're in a pneumonia outbreak situation, that vet clinic calls my vet clinic, I send over a prescription, and everything is perfectly legal. There's no issues with that at all.
All right. And then I have a question for Melissa here. So if you just want to join us as well, Melissa. Just give you a second. There we go. So does the vet have to send a prescription directly to the feed mill, or is the producer able to do that? Does the vet and feed mill essentially have to work together, or can the producer just come in order?
Absolutely not. So the prescription needs to come from the producer or the veterinarian. It doesn't matter which one.
Okay. So I just have one more question here. So if anybody has any last minute questions for either of tonight's presenter, to get them in here quick before we wrap up. But just a question for both of you. What do you think the biggest change will be for the average producer?
Well,
Cody,
can I
go
go
ahead.
first? Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I believe that one of the biggest challenges will just be being proactive. I think that it has been relatively easy for people, and it's just human nature to kind of fall into the go out and purchase it when I need it sort of mentality without any sort of planning or proaction on their part. You know, the scenario is it is 4:30 p.m. on a Friday and you've never been to the vet clinic before and you need a bottle of biomycin because you have a cow with pneumonia. Now you're going into the clinic and the clinic's saying we have no vets available. We can't set up a medical record. We can't set up a VCPR. We can't do a prescription because we just don't have any vets available. It's 4:30 on Friday and they're all out on preg testing calls. So what needs to happen in that proactive part is you need to start those conversations with veterinarians if you don't have that relationship, and tell them that, you know, you may need something in the future, and make sure that everything is set up before that day that they actually need that prescription product. Gone are the days of quickly running into the farm store, into the UFA to quickly purchase the bottle of penicillin and running home. We're going to need to be a little bit more proactive. I work with farmers and ranchers every day of my life. I completely understand that it goes against most of their nature, but that is the reality of what we're dealing with. Is there's going to need to be some planning to make sure that everything goes smoothly. And I think the same goes on the feed mill side. There's a lot of times where we get phone calls from producers or feed mills that all of a sudden we needed a prescription in place 12 seconds ago because we didn't know what was going on, and then we're scrambling and rushing to make sure we have a supporting medical record and a prescription in place for that feed mill. So we're just going to need to see producers, veterinarians, nutritionists, feed mills being more proactive in making sure that this is all done before we need it done.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Cody. It's all about preparation, being ready for those situations, and knowing where you could access your products as well come December 1st.
All right, thank you. So a couple other questions coming in. So do prescriptions transfer from province to province? So for example, if you had a prescription in BC, can you fill it in Alberta?
So once again, every province border and relationship between VMA and VMA differs. So I believe BC to Alberta, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, does not exist to date. But there is an interprovincial agreement between Alberta and Saskatchewan for a prescription in Alberta at an Alberta vet clinic to be appropriate in a Saskatchewan clinic in some situations. So it really is dependent, but because each veterinarian group is provincially regulated, it's not as smoothly integrated as one might think. So yes and no, depending on which provinces.
All right. And then one more question here came in. As part of this new legislation, will vets have to report prescriptions to a government agency? And if so, how often?
So certainly the tracking of how much antimicrobials are being used within the system, within the food animal system, is one of the goals that I believe Health Canada originally set out to do. It is not perfect, and it's something that the industry is certainly striving for, but not as of right now would a veterinarian, a single veterinary practice, have to submit anything to a federal body in terms of the amount of prescription antimicrobials we are dispensing on a sort of regular basis. Systems for us to track that kind of at a larger level.
Yeah, so the regulations will require going forward the pharmaceutical companies to report to Health Canada on their sales, but that's and try to decide which species those are being sold to. But that's as granular as it's going to be for the moment.
Okay. So I think that's all we have for questions tonight. So thank you for taking the time to answer those. So I just have a couple quick things before I let everybody go here. The first is how you can get more information and science-based production advice through the BCRC. You can go to our website, beefresearch.ca, and click the subscribe button, and you'll sign up for our free email list. If you have a Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube account, you can connect with us there. I want to let you know about our next webinar, which will be taking place in a couple of weeks here, where we'll be talking about transporting cattle safely. So please mark that in your calendars and join us for that. So in the chat window here on the control panel on the side of your screen, you're going to be seeing, or sorry, it's not there tonight. In the follow-up email we'll send out, we're going to send a link to a survey. We ask that you do fill this out just so that it gives us an idea of what you're interested in for future webinars. We really do want to use topics that are useful and applicable to you on your operations. So please, when you do get that follow-up email, please take the time to take about 5 minutes to fill out that survey. We would really appreciate it. Within the next couple of days, as I mentioned, you're going to receive an email with a link to watch the recording, as well as some additional information, as well as that was requested tonight. So with that, I think that's everything I have. So thank you to everybody at home for joining us tonight. And on behalf of everyone on the call tonight, thanks Melissa and Cody for volunteering your time and expertise.